Yo ho ho, and once again I'm too busy to write reviews, so I will do a quick summary of books that I've recently read that have got a bit of a theme going through them. Let's see if you can spot the theme. The first one I have mentioned before is Die My Love by Ariana Harwitz, published by New Press, Charco Press, that is trying to bring Latin American books to us, so a very worthy endeavor indeed. And it's translated by Sarah Moses and Carolina Orloff, and Carolina Orloff is one of the founders of Charco Press. It actually takes place in France, so it's an Argentinian woman that has moved to France and is both struggling perhaps with the culture, married to a Frenchman, has just given birth to a child, and is also suffering postnatal depression. It emerges quite clearly, and just generally feels out of place, out of love with her situation, with her husband, with her husband's family, although they do seem to have an awful lot of patience for her rather eccentric behavior. However, the truth is she doesn't fit in. She's very cultivated, cultured, and loves reading and loves quite fancy music, while they are really farmers living in a small village community. So she feels incredibly alienated. She really feels like she doesn't belong, and she's a woman falling apart. And it's really an intense read. If you have ever been in a similar situation where you feel that your life is not yours anymore and everybody is pulling at you and you don't know how to handle it, you're falling apart, this is the book for you. It was perhaps a little bit too close to home at certain moments. It reminded me of myself 3-4 years ago. And I really read it in one gasp almost. But you have to be in a very good, steady frame of mind to read it. It is very intense, but also highly recommended. Quite experimental fiction, written as a sort of stream of consciousness, almost without paragraphs, with just flowing one from the other. Another similar book, in a way, is Flesh of the Peach by Scottish writer Helen McAlaury. She won the Saltire First Book of the Year prize for this. It is, again, quite experimental, rather unlikable young lady, a UK person who has moved to the States. Sarah Brown, she's an artist, and she's lived in New York, and her relationship with a married woman falls apart. She's feeling unwanted. She's decided to move back to the UK. She's not got a job anymore. So, but she doesn't really want to move back to the UK. She has had a difficult relationship with her mother, who has just died. She's supposed to go back for her mother's funeral. Her mother was quite an aristocratic, rich lady living in a country house in Devon, I believe, and she decides instead to go to her mother's cabin in New Mexico. So she takes a Greyhound bus, that's the bus, and goes cross-country, goes west to discover her mother's secret refuge, if you like, and in a sense to discover herself and come to terms with her relationship with her mother and her childhood anxieties. She meets the neighbours there, an intriguing and kind young man who lives nearby, and his rather less kind mother, and it just goes on from there with some shocking moments of, as I said, quite an unlikable character, but a character that you can really empathise with and root for, and hope that she finds herself in the end and comes to terms with herself in the end. Another journey of discovery, but in a rather different way, is Under the Harrow by Flynn Berry. This time it's written by an American writer, but set in the UK. And I have to admit that there were some instances where I noticed some discrepancies, where the protagonist has to go from Paddington to King's Cross, for instance, which is a journey that I make nearly every day, and the stations are in the wrong order. So, you know, on such small details do we flounder. So it is a bit surprising that she chose to set it in Oxfordshire, I suppose, most of it. So the main protagonist is Nora, and she takes the train. She's a landscape designer. She has not really made a success of her life. She's not very happy with herself and what she has achieved. She's quite proud of her sister Rachel. They have quite a good relationship, sometimes somewhat tense, but on the whole they trust and love each other. And she goes to see her sister Rachel quite frequently in a little village in Oxfordshire. But one day when she goes there, she finds that her sister has been killed, and so has her sister's dog. So cue to any animal lovers who cannot take violence against animals, it will be a bit gruesome. And so she starts to investigate what has happened to her sister. What was she afraid of? Were there any changes in the last few days of her life or weeks of her life? What has she missed? Is there anything from their past that is coming back to haunt them? And so on. So it is partly a police investigation. The police does make an appearance, but partly it is a woman's own internal and external journey, trying to discover the secrets of her sister and why she was killed. And I think this is why the book suffers a little bit. I did not like it perhaps as much as the first two, because it is not purely experimental and literary and interesting kind of fiction of self-discovery. It does sort of hover into the thriller territory, and as a thriller, you know, I love thrillers and psychological thrillers and crime fiction, but it didn't quite do it for me as crime fiction, and it didn't quite do it for me as experimental fiction. But it's an interesting blend of the two, so I'd still recommend it. And the final one in women behaving badly, although this one, it would be fair to say it's women and men behaving badly. It's couples falling apart, growing old. It's really quite sad and poignant. It's Alice Rivard, who was a Swiss writer in French. She died in 1998. She was born in 1901, so she pretty much lived throughout the 20th century and saw a lot of things one can imagine. And perhaps that explains why her short stories, and this is a collection of short stories, are very bleak. There is no hope of redemption. You cannot find comfort, or her characters do not find comfort in family or religion or love or anything like that, or close friendships. It is really about how you are all alone in the world and you're going to get old and die. And apparently a Japanese publisher was interested in having her short stories translated for a Japanese audience, and then thought that they were just too sad. So if it's too sad for Japan, which Japanese literature has a reputation for being quite sad in the first place, you can imagine that they are really sad. And yet there's a lot of humor, a lot of recognizable moments that will make you wince and grin and perhaps even laugh out loud, or shed a tear. And incidentally, sans alcool is a bit of a play on words. It refers to the restaurants that do not serve alcohol with their meals, so the kind of cheap canteens, but also to well, I suppose taking life without alcohol or without drugs or any kind of anesthetic that could numb our feelings. It's about being realist to the end. So that's it for the Women Behaving Badly by women authors. And I will come with some seasonal cheer perhaps, and more seasonal readings next time. Bye bye.